places, that's what they used to have. Sketches of Etruscan places. It was in one whole book. And they have all the pictures. You say, well, what do I care about the pictures? Well, the pictures are really make the whole thing come alive. And I don't know why they, it's Penguin and that's Penguin. They discontinued publishing this for some unknown reason, which leaves us high and dry in terms of good experience. Perhaps next class I do this with, I'll Xerox the pictures so we can get a handout of the pictures. Maybe I'll even try to do that for next time.
You can get it at text, university text on .5. That's right.
Oh, you did? Yeah? What's it called?
University text.
What's that? Bookstore?
It's like next to Offset.
Oh,
It's on Stearns and Bell.
how come they have it?
Because they get used books from here.
Oh, they get used books from here.
That's why they're cheaper than.
Hold it up. Hold it up. Let them see it. There, she gets to that place called University Text. Wow. Okay, that's worth having, because the one we got, unfortunately, is not, you know, it's a good book for your library, but it's not, you know. So we started this by showing what a good writer Lawrence actually is. And with this lovely first sentence that I don't think many people could equal, I know that I wouldn't be able to write such a good first sentence to anything. I'm only good maybe in my last sentences. Nobody ever gets to. The Etruscans, everybody knows, were the people who occupied the middle of Italy in early Roman days, and whom the Romans, in the usual neighborly fashion, wiped out entirely in order to make room for Rome with a very big R. That shows you all of his attitudes exactly right from the beginning, how he feels. He doesn't hold anything back. He's not playing games. He's not trying to be fair. He's telling you as he sees it is. The Romans wiped these people out. The Romans wiped out all kinds of people in their usual neighborly fashion, including Gauls, Britons, Etruscans, Jews in Palestine, and others. And causing a lot of the modern problems we actually still face. And it's hard to believe that these things can still, you know, pursue us down in the present, but they do. Probably created Christianity in the process, and so on. So I know many people think God creates these religions, but I'm of the unfortunate minority of humans who think that human beings on Earth do it. So I'm going to have to excuse me if I'm not a deist in terms of supernatural forces intervening in human events. But that, I just saw a program last night on Cleopatra, how she considered herself to be the goddess Osiris incarnate, and about her death in terms of Osiris being always identified with snakes, and so the picture of her death, the snake bite, which they were trying to show, was an impossibility because given the timing involved in the accounts, the snake bite would have taken half a day or 2 days to actually work, and they have her dying in like 5 minutes. So it's, you know, they say, what's that got to do with it? Well, the identification with the goddess Isis is what they said produced a picture of her demise in the classical presentation of it. In the process, they showed that the person probably responsible for her death, who had nothing to gain for it, Caesar's nephew Octavius, who was taking over the world, ultimately called himself Augustus, started to characterize himself as the son of the divine Julius, the son of the divine Julius. So you get all these people developing their own god legends, and to compete in this marketplace of god legends, which the Romans and the Hellenistic peoples loved to create. I think the one that we're most familiar with entered the fray. So anybody who was anybody in contention in that particular competition had to be a son of God. And, I think that's where a lot of these kind of were very enthusiastic for it even down to the present time. So I don't want to underestimate its power. But given my cynicism, it seems to me that humans had a role in most of these creations. Well, in any event, they couldn't have wiped them all out. There were too many of them. But they did wipe out Etruscan existence as a nation and a people. However, this seems to be the inevitable result of expansion with a big E, which is the sole raison d'etre, the sole reason for being of people like the Romans. Well, he dislikes the Romans. He thinks that they're power country. He thinks that all they're interested in is in expansion. My own feeling about this, if it matters at all, I agree with him. I think he's got it exactly right, and what we learn in our high school or other classes concerning introductions, even on television, program type things, is totally wrong. The Romans were interested in expansion, control, brutalization, conquest, and repression, and there's hardly anything you can think of except their roads and their architecture that is, to an extent, admirable. And the roads were built so the armies could move faster anyway, just like Hitler built the autobahns for his armies. So you can skip the roads as far as noble endeavor just happened to turn out, like our freeways have turned out to be useful. The buildings, well, the Colosseum was a death palace that they built, so even though it's an impressive structure, what it was used for was to kill people for public displays of killing. So, I mean, it's pretty gruesome public works project. Anyway, now we know nothing about the Etruscans except what we find in the tombs. There are references to them in Latin writers, but at first-hand knowledge we have nothing except the tombs to offer, so to the tombs we must go, or to the museums containing the things that have been rifled from the tombs. What do you think of museums? He doesn't much like museums. I think, I read an article the other day about Bush, that they took him to a museum in Madrid or someplace, and he ran through it as fast as he could go, and then they took him to one somewhere else, and I think he spent 10 minutes. His wife was looking at the pictures and things, but he couldn't wait to get out. Sometimes I feel that way about museums, too. I like museums in the fact they have interesting things, but they're very impressive in the amount of interesting things that they lay on you in one go. If you go into a museum and looking for a couple of things that you want to see, I can think that that could be a rewarding experience. But to just walk past picture after picture after picture, or sculpture after sculpture after sculpture, you begin to become, deadened to your reaction. The best we can do in the modern period, because people want to see these things, and that's certainly an admirable urge, but museums do tend to be a little bit, not just deadening, but sterile. And there's nothing like seeing something in situ. You know what the word in situ means? In situation. Seeing it where it actually came from. And that's the beauty of his going to these Etruscan tombs. They're still there, with the paintings on the wall that you can see. Unfortunately, I've been there in the time. I would show you some slides, but I don't have time in this class at the moment. I've been there since he's been there. One of these tomb areas, Civetri, is if you leave Rome on the autostrada, as they're called in Italy, auto route, freeway, they're not free. On your way to the coastline, where Rome is, you soon see the signs to this Civetri place. And just about a half hour from Rome on the I hate to say freeway. What's the paved freeway called in America? The toll road, okay. On the toll road, on the tollway. On the tollway. So in Italy, again, they're called autostradas. Nice word, autostrada. So you can see it, and it's well worth a visit. There are these weird little tumuli there, sort of stone bumps, all clustered around, but it's very quiet and peaceful, and it's above there's a bustling little town that's grown up in more modern times, a typical Italian town, a lot of, you know, traffic and outdoor cafes and screeching and gasoline stations and the like. But if you go up to these tubes, I don't know if I have a good picture here. Hope I do. Let's see if I have one in here that's really, it's a very bad picture to see, but there are these tumuli here, these round tumuli here. And they're still like that. It's grown up a bit more. And inside, they're like houses of the dead, if you want to call it that. And I think I have actually, oops, money. Whoa! Hey, where'd that come from? Out of my book! God almighty, I should open more books. Thanks a lot. Usually my students would pocket that as payment for having suffered from me, but that's very kind of you. Here's another good picture of one. It's in a whole section. Here's another picture there. And it's very stirring to go and visit that place. So if you have a chance and you go to Italy, by all means, don't just go to the Vatican. You won't be sorry to go over to this place, which is not far from Rome, as I said, about, I would say 35 miles from Rome or something like that. 50 kilometers, as they say in Europe. So, the museums weren't enough for me. Either there's instant sympathy or instant contempt. Most people despise everything BC that isn't Greek. Again, he's right. You know, I don't know. People out here in California don't even care much about the Greeks, but back east where I grew up, I mean, Greek civilization was like, people were totally in awe still. All the architecture, all the public buildings in America are based on Greek norms. Columns, Greek columns, our Capitol building, the Lincoln Memorial, all of those things are like quasi-Greek, Neo-Greco-Roman forms. And of course the Parthenon in Athens is considered the most perfect of all buildings that anyone can imagine and so on, even though it's blown up by an ammunition explosion in the Turkish-Greek war back in the 1800s. Still, you know, or maybe it was the 1600s. It was used by the Turks as an ammunition dump and it blew up in their fighting. It was actually pretty well preserved up to the 1600s. So people, anything that isn't Greek is looked down upon. So the Greeks achieved absolute perfection in sculpture and architecture and the arts generally. And in many ways one has to agree with that. You don't want to put the Greeks down. But Lawrence is cantankerous. He wants something less impressive, less imposing, less perfect. He wants something more human with the touch of life in it. This whole thing is, as you'll see as you talked about here, the quick of life. So if you're looking for perfect things, you know, you might end up, you know, killing all the buffalo on the American plains to make things all perfect. But if you want things with the quick of life in it, then you're going to leave the buffalo herds there. So his philosophy will, in fact, impede upon our conception of ecology and other things. Now, what you'll see as you read through this, and I want to pay particular attention, is a sensibility to flowers. He's really the first flower child. I mean, he knows flowers that I've never even heard of. A lot of English people do, you know. They know what flowers are, and he knows what verbena are, or forget-me-nots, or he can spend a whole page talking about asphodels. I don't even know what an asphodel is. You know, how many of you know what asphodels are? Yeah, well, you are like me, you see. And he gives it to his guy to look at, and the guy says, and he says, do you like this flower? And the fellow says, yeah, and fiore, puzzo. it's a flower, it stinks, smells. That's about the size of his reaction. You know, what you and I might call a dumbbell reaction. But Lawrence is the most sensitive, has the most exquisite sensibilities, most sensitive of men. In fact, if I were a woman, I think I probably would find him quite attractive if I was a woman. I'm not trying to get gay on you all here, but or become a transvestite or something. But the point of the matter is, trying to put myself, and he did put himself into the feminine sensibility, the first one to do it really in any serious way, besides, I guess, Tolstoy and Joyce preceded him in that. Anna Karenina for Tolstoy and Molly Bloom and Joyce. But aside from those two, he did put himself into the woman's feminine sexual psyche in Lady Chatterley's Lover, the groundbreaking book I told you about that actually has produced the whole pornographic revolution that we have since experienced, for good or for bad. That was published in 1926, in case you're interested. He died in 1931. This was published around the same time. So I think this was 1928 or so. So this is towards the end of his life when he himself is dying and probably isn't really functioning sexually because he has tuberculosis. He's had it since he was a very young man, still quite young, you know, in his late 30s, early 40s. But when he died, his sensitivity to flowers is amazing, and I think this is what I think probably would endear him to women, probably more than men in the class, because I think women actually respond to sensitive men. Men think that they are responding to brute force, that they love the, you know, everyone, you know, lifting weights and, you know, sort of, what do you call it? I can't give you what the mentality would be called. Kids used to tell me words that describes it, but I can't quite. Anyway, men sort of, you know, I would say Yabo men, sort of, I don't have the right word for it at the moment, it'll come to me. In any case, think that women like, you know, all this sort of thing of force, muscles, maybe I can look at it and things, but actually I think what women like is a sensitive consciousness and a man who's going to respond to them in a sensitive and feeling way, someone who can identify with what they're feeling, someone who they can admire in terms not just of a physique, a personal body experience for 5 minutes, but someone whom they can actually enjoy spending time with. It's not just a slob. Lawrence fits that bill. If you look at any of the people that we've met in this class, this term, even someone like Walt Whitman, I don't like to spend a lot of time with him. I think you get on your nerves, you say, oh God, get off me, you slob, you know, stop, you know, slobbering all over me and so on and so forth. I like you, you're a good guy, I understand that you mean well, but, you know, keep your distance from me, you know, you're too smelly. But Lawrence would be probably the person who you'd most like to take a walk with, because you could learn so much. It was just a lively, entertaining walk that would be probably an unforgettable experience. But he would be the perfect, you know, traveling companion, someone to spend time with. That's what I'm trying to say. I think women did like him, actually. I don't think he ran after women or anything like that. He wasn't like Bill Clinton or Jack Kennedy or something. You know, I don't think he behaved like that. He was, I'm just using people that were familiar with their behavior patterns. No, he was, women sought his company in some way, because he was such a delicate yet strong person. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't a weakling. Very strong but totally sensitive. So that comes through in the book, and he puts it here. Either there's instant sympathy or instant contempt and indifference. Most people despise everything BC that isn't Greek for the good reason that it ought to be Greek. If it isn't, it's such good writing. Really good writing. And he just throws it off. It's just like he's talking to you like a person. I don't know if you can appreciate good writing from bad. Good writing is something that is fun to read, entertains you. You know, you can read People magazine until you're blue in the face, or the newspaper, and you'll find it, you know, you'll just like, ugh, you know, enough of that, you know, that, trash or tripe if you want. But here's someone who really knows how to express himself, and you do it in a personal, human way. He doesn't use highfalutin words either. You know, most people despise everything BC that isn't Greek for the good reason that it ought to be Greek if it isn't. So Etruscan things are put down. They're already using a word that we're familiar with in America even today, and back then, as feeble Greco-Roman imitations. Anyway, as a great scientific historian like Mommsen, who was the maybe social scientist of his time, hardly allows Etruscans existed at all. And here he gets back to his lovely sarcasm. Their existence was antipathetic to him. That's a word we don't usually hear or use, but it's perfect. You know, what is antipathetic? It's the opposite of what? Sympathetic. You know, something is sympathetic to you or antipathetic to you. You know, and it's a perfect word. I mean, if you just grab it, it just comes right down. And it's instead of he didn't like them. Their existence was antipathetic to him because he has a Russian, Germanic, Prussian streak to him. You know, very formal and you know contemptuous bearing in his work he's referring to. The Prussian in him was enthralled by the Prussian in the all-conquering Romans. So, being a great scientific historian, he almost denies the very existence of the Etruscan people. He didn't like the idea of them. That was enough for a great scientific historian. Look at how he just rips to shreds a modern scholar type person. He himself is, if you like, you feel the sarcasm there. And that's the first page. So whether you like or understand why we're reading this, you can appreciate that you're being faced with or presented with or encountering someone who knows how to write. So what do I want to know how to write for? Well, if you know how to write, you can do great charming things in this world, even on a personal level with people that you know. Listen to the next sentence. Besides, the Etruscans were vicious. Oh, poor, they were vicious. We know it. You know why? Because they're enemies and exterminators said so. That's in 3-4 words, 2 sentences, he says it all. It's a little bit, I don't want to get into the Jewish issue, it's Christmas time, but it's a little bit like the way the Jews are presented in the Gospels. You know, we know the Jews are the way they are because they're enemies and exterminators who wrote those documents said so. And so I would put about as much stock in them as I put in some of these other things that he's talking about. Just as we know the unspeakable deaths of our enemies in the Great War, who isn't vicious to his enemy? To my detractors, I am the effigy of vice. Yeah, that's about true. A la bonne, what's that mean, a la bonne? Good luck. Good luck to you. A little bit of French thrown in a kind of toast, if you think so, in other words. However, these pure, and it is not finished yet, clean, living, sweet-souled Romans who smashed nation after nation and crushed the free soul in people after people. So, you know, we like the Lawrence. We know we're on the side of freedom. And we're ruled by Messalina and Heliogapolis and such like snowdrops. People who used to compete with the prostitutes in the marketplace to see who could handle the most men. They said the Etruscans were vicious. So we should believe them, right? No. So basta, come metropole, tout le monde se tait. Basta in Italian means, okay, enough. When the master speaks, everyone should pay attention. Do you remember those ads he used to have for that stock company, E.F. Hutton or something? It used to be, you know, that people would be eating and then they'd listen to someone who was talking about E.F. Hutton and then they'd all try to listen to what they were saying. You know, when the master speaks, everybody should pay attention. Yeah, when the Romans speak, we should all listen to them. Tell me about it. So these are very modern sensibilities. The Etruscans were vicious. The only vicious people on the earth, face of the earth, presumably. You and I, dear reader, we're two unsullied snowflakes, aren't we? We have every right to judge. That's such lively stuff, even though it seems like it's such a dead essay, right? That's why I'm reading it with you. Because, you know, in this thing that you wouldn't even pick up unless I shoved it down your throats, you find some of the best writing that you'll ever encounter in an essay form. You know, it's just totally alive. Who can make a visiting dead Etruscan places live? Only a person himself who was totally alive. But he's, you see, listen, you and I, dear reader, we're two unsullied snowflakes, aren't we? We have every right to judge. Myself, however, if the Etruscans were vicious, I'm glad they were. To the Puritan, that gets to his sexual matters and other things. All things are impure, as somebody says, and those naughty neighbors of the Romans at least escape being Puritans. But to the tombs, to the tombs! You know, he changes gears. Let's get moving! I don't know how he wrote this. Maybe in like 2 days, he just sat down and jotted it off after he visited these places. So I wish I had done this myself when I visited a few places. On a sunny April morning, we set out for the tombs from Rome, the eternal city, now in a black bonnet. It was not far to go, about 20 miles over the Campagna toward the sea on a line to Pisa. As I told you, about 35 miles, he said it's about 20. Why is Rome in a black bonnet at this time in the 20s? Fascism has taken root there, when Lawrence hates fascism, even before it got to its final horrific end. But on the way, what's he first see? Narcissus, the first flower. The Campagna, the area towards the coast from Rome, with its great green spread of growing wheat, is almost humid again. But still there are damp, empty tracts where now the little narcissus stands in clumps or covers whole fields. I wouldn't even know what a narcissus was if I saw it. My wife would know. She's British. British like to tend their gardens. But, you know a lot of you women in the class would probably appreciate someone who knew the names of flowers, not just to give you presents, you know, to call the florist and send you a bunch of flowers. No, someone who actually knew what a flower was and could explain to you the history of such things, and yet without a fruitcake. That's really a unique combination, let me tell you. You understand what I'm talking about. I don't know how many men you've met like this. Just write me a letter and tell me about all these creatures that you're encountering with this kind of sensibility. Now, I'm not saying I haven't. I don't put myself in this category. I am a dumbbell. But I can appreciate someone who does have things like this. And there are places green and foaming, all white with chamomile. Oh, the only chamomile we know is what Peter Rabbit gets to drink in his tea. Chamomile tea, but I wouldn't know what the chamomile flower looked like. But he knows. On a sunny morning, you feel what he's talking about. On a sunny morning in early April, we're going to Chivetri, which was the ancient cherry, and it had a Greek name too, Argila. It was a gay and gaudy Etruscan city when Rome put up her first few hovels, probably. Anyhow, there are tombs there now. So now he takes the place out 5 miles on this post-omnibus. What would a post-omnibus be? Well, in those days, you would have a bus that would go out to outlying towns that would bring the mail, and then it would sit there all day and come back in the evening or something. So that would be the post-omnibus, the post bus, but also double as a passenger bus. And there we were at Paolo. And is there a bus to Chivetri? No. An ancient sort of wagon with an ancient white horse stands outside. Where does that go? Lattice pole. You'll see that sign on the freeways too as you're going down if you drive this way. We don't want to go to lattice pole, so we stare at the landscape. Could we get a carriage of some sort? It'd be difficult. That's what they always say. Difficult. It's difficult. Nothing can get done. Meaning impossible. At least they will lift a finger to help. See, here's the first tourist, if you like, too. The first backpacking tourist who tells us about how it is to not go first class, but third class, the way we travel today. They don't know. They've never, any of them, ever been. It's only 5 miles away. And if you go to these outlying areas, even today in some places, people have never been more than 5 or 10 miles from where they grew up. Particularly back in you know, before the jet plane and the, you know, internet and so on, very few people ever went anywhere. Only people who really could afford it or were released from their toil. I was in Jerusalem not long ago, and there was this monastery 7 kilometers outside of the city, and I got in an Arab taxi, and I told him to go out to this place. He asked me, where is it? It's 7 miles outside of the city. He'd never been there in his life. And he's a taxi driver. I mean, you know, I had to direct him where to go. This is often the case. They've never been there. Well, okay, we leave our 2 bags at the station. They've got these sort of rucksacks or something. But they can't accept them. This is typical problems you have when you're traveling. How much he puts in here. How many are familiar with this kind of thing? You know, there's always a little hassle that, you know, that crops up when you're traveling. They can't accept the bags. Why? Oh, because they don't have a lock on them. They're rucksack type things. Oh, gosh. Too much responsibility. Someone might open your bag and steal something. You know, you can't leave your bags here. Sorry. There's always problems of this kind everywhere, isn't there, when you're on the road? If you've been on the road, I don't know, and not just in an automobile. But if you've been in an automobile, the same things happen to you. Because they're not locked. A hold-all, he means a rucksack. When did a hold-all or a rucksack ever lock? Oh, difficult. Well then, let's leave them and steal if you want to. Oh no, impossible, stop, no, not possible. Go down to maybe Mexico and you might encounter some similar situations. Such a moral responsibility. The sarcasm is marvelous. Impossible to leave an unlocked small rucksack at the station. Does he like officials? No. He likes nothing of these organization bureaucracies. So much for officials! Exclamation point. However, we tried the little buffet around the corner, and the bartender there is very laconic, but seems all right. We abandon our things in a corner, leave them in the little cafe there, so that we can get off. Why do they want to leave the things? Because they got to walk to this place, some 5 or 8 miles up the road. How many have had these kinds of troubles when they travel? None of you? I have. That makes 2 of us, out of 3 of us. You always run into things like this. Always. If you're on an outline, places particularly. It's so familiar to me personally to see what he's writing here. Well, luckily it's only about 10 in the morning. Well, we take this flat, wide road, a road not far from the sea, a bare, flattish, hot white road with nothing but a tilted ox wagon at a distance. I've been on that road now. It's a 4-lane highway, just full of cars and traffic and every other thing. But a tilted oxen wagon, like a huge snail with 4 horns. Besides the road, what's he see? The tall asphodel is letting off its spasmodic pink sparks, rather at random and smelling of cats. You say, why are you reading us all this? To show you his sensibility to nature, the environment, ecology, life, because that's going to be his whole philosophy or religion. And that's what he's going to see in the Etruscan tombs, the religion of life, of what he calls the quick spark of life. He's going to see it particularly in the paintings. But I want to show you that he's already, it's not just enough that he sees it, he already lives, thinks that way. So in this way he becomes a kind of prophet of this kind of outlook to life. Way to the random is the sea, beyond the flat green wheat, the Mediterranean glistening flat, deadish. Ahead are the hills, the ragged pit, we trudge on a bit. What page is this in your book? After all, it's only 5 miles and a bit. So they gotta go 5 miles. Does that bother him? Now, if you were going someplace today, and you got to a station or an airport or someplace, they said, oh, the place you gotta see, that's 5 miles out of here. You gotta walk. Most of you just get back on the bus and keep moving, or forget it. My kids, it was mild to school. The idea that they weren't going to get driven occasionally just filled them with horror. I mean, what? Walk a mile? Are you kidding? Walk to school? I mean, my God. So 5 miles to see an old rotten tomb? pack it in. Not him. He's going to go to the tubes, come hell or high water, and that's where he's going to get to, period. And you say, what about you, Professor Eisenman? What would you do? I guess I would have packed it in. But you know, I've got to admire the kind of people that don't pack it in. So he takes this walk, and he tells you about it. We trudge on this dull road. After all, it's only 5 miles and a bit. Now he tells you a little bit about Cerveteri and its history. Finally, they come into this town, and they go to this place called Vini and Cucina. Of course, Italian food is very popular now, so you all know what that means. What's that mean? Vini, what's that?
Wine.
Wine and cucina? Kitchen, cooking. So it's a little cavern, and we trotted down a few steps, and it's sort of like Sardinia. He's got that Sea of Sardinia a piece in your book, so you can look at that if you want to do the travels in Sardinia that he does. And suddenly he sees eating in this strange little hovel, you know, basement, cavern. Inspires a spurred shepherd. And what he sees here is the ancient man that he admires, the man unspoiled by modernity. Wearing goatskin trousers, long rusty brown goat hair hanging shaggy. He imagines all this. Of course, we don't know if this is a perfect man or not, but in his mind it's perfection. He grins and drinks wine. Immediately one sees again the shaggy fawn-legged fawn. He's the fawn man. His face is fawn face. And what he means by that, not deadened by morals. You see, here's an attack on modern morals. Actually, there's a little bit of Nietzsche in this. Nietzsche was a German philosopher who wrote in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. So Lawrence, who would have been born in the 80s, would have already known his work. Needless to say, also married a German woman. But Nietzsche was famous in many ways as a father of postmodernist philosophy. Nazis plugged into him, but I think probably incorrectly, though he had some weird ideas. His sister was a fascist, and she controlled the last 10 years of his life when he had syphilis, and she kind of marketed him as a kind of Nazi prophet. But when you read him, he's very much against Nazism, actually. He believed that the artist should create, the artist should be the terminator of the modern society, that you have to create your own meaning. He's the one who proclaimed the philosophy that God is dead and so on. He wrote a book called Genealogy of Morals, and I think that's what Lawrence has been reading here. A lot of writers at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century were reading Nietzsche. Particularly people like, how many have seen the movie or read the book Zorba the Greek? Well, the Greek writer, Kazantzakis, or there was a Lebanese writer who wrote a book that was very popular for a period of time called The Prophet. Still gets around, Khalil Gibran, and he was doing a Lebanese prophet. Nietzsche wanted to do an Aryan prophet as opposed to a Semitic prophet, so he wrote a book called Thus Spake Zarathustra. Well, I'm sure Lawrence has been reading all that, particularly Joyce, the famous Irish author, totally Nietzschean writer, and writing everything under the influence of Nietzsche. Lawrence, to some extent, too. All these people had plugged into Nietzsche, and this is an example here, a face not deadened by morals. It was the development of morality, calling things good and evil, that for him, in some ways, causes some of this dislocation, and calling the Native American a red savage or something, which comes out of moral thinking, you're superior type thinking. That he feels this way. That's the philosophy lurking behind here. In any case, this is a pre-moral person. He's just a natural person. He grins quietly and talks very subdued. You see, this is actually a philosophy, not a philosophy book as such, but a religious tract. And you don't realize it until you get halfway through it. Again, while I'm reading it, I shouldn't have 2 periods for it, but I'm trying to get something out of it today. He glanced at us from the corner of his eyes, ducks, wipes his mouth and back of his hand, and is gone, clambering with hairy legs on a lean pony, swirling, rattling away with a neat little cloud of hooves under the ramparts away to the open. He's the fawn, escaping out of the city precincts, far more shy and evanescent than any Christian virgin. You cannot hard-boil him. He was worried about the hard-boiled women he was meeting in the modern society, the women who have to make a living. I know in feminism we want to do this, but Lawrence was frightened to some extent by the fact that they were getting too hard. He's got sort of some very good poetry on this. His poetry is really good. And he's already seen it in the 1920s. And he wants to go back to a time when people are ruled by, I don't know how he'll put it, we'll hear the cosmos, as he puts it. It was an old time. You don't see this fawn face much anymore. Rather common in the South, but now you'll hardly see these men. With unconscious, ungrimacing fawn face. That would be also the gamekeeper who seduces Lady Chatterley in the novel that I mentioned. They were all apparently killed in the last war, the First World War. They would be sure not to survive such a war. These men would not survive a war mechanized with gassing and trench warfare and machine guns and brutal charges and the total inhumanity of such a war as that. They would be sure not to survive that war. Anyway, the last one I knew, a handsome fellow of his own age, 40 and a bit, is going a bit odd and morose, crushed between warm memories that have revived and remorseless. And here's the other thing, though. Sorry, you women in the class, don't be too put off by this. Go ahead, women club. In other words, this over aggressiveness that he's beginning to see frightens him. Probably when I go south again, he will have disappeared. They can't survive these fawn-faced men with their pure outlines and their strange, non-moral calm. There's a description, if you like, of what he considers this perfect pre-Christian man or being, who is pure. He has this strange, non-moral calm. Very well described. Only the deflowered faces survive. People who are corrupted in modern, if you like, urban city existence. So much for the Moremos shepherd. We got to get moving. The girl in the cavern, a nice girl, had but a backup, found us a guide, obviously her brother, about 14. Like everyone in this abandoned place, shy and suspicious, holding back. The stranger is always a menace, and I and B, he's with an American guy who he doesn't name, but he's called B, are two very, I think his name is actually Brewster or something like that, are very quiet-mannered, harmless men, but the first boy could not have borne to go alone with us. No, not alone. He would have been afraid as if he were in the dark, so he's got to bring a friend along to go with him. So anyway, they finally get moving, and he describes this place, Chibetri. Now stands, I think it's on page, what page is it? The village of Chibetri stands, there must have been arks, the ark, the inner citadel of the holy city, so on and so forth. The Etruscans built everything of wood, houses, temples, all save fortifications. What page is that? Is it 6 or 13? 6, okay, because I got 2 sets of pages depending on which book I'm following here. Gates, bridges, so the Etruscan cities vanished like flowers. Only the tombs, the bulbs under the ground, which were built of stone and were built on a sort of rock outcropping usually across the valley from where the cities were, survived. And on the parallel hills opposite, they like to have their city of the dead, the necropolis. The necropolis is the city of the dead. So they can stand on the ramparts and look over the hollow where the stream flowed among its bushes across from the city of life, gay with its painted houses and temples. Down here in the gully, the village rather, has built its wash house, and he sees the women washing. They are good-looking women of the old world, with that very attractive look of noiselessness and inwardness which most women have had in the past. I have to tell you, for instance, if you go abroad and you sit in a restaurant and a group of Americans come in, what you hear is the women yakking at the top of their lungs usually at a table where you get Americans, and you don't hardly hear the men speaking at all. They're like, how I know it are men, it's always the men yakking it up. But it's odd, the reversal one finds overseas. What he's worried about is this like boisterous, insensitive, sort of gaudy behavior, which is to him not like people used to behave in the past, the distant past. Well, you'll have to judge that. I don't want to excuse him. If you're offended by that, you have to deal with it in your own way, and you should be blamed. It was just like Mexico, only smaller and more human. He knows Mexico well. You do see these things go in Mexico. The boys went ahead across the fallow land and back to the flowers, where there were many flowers. I don't know how many flowers he mentioned now, about 6 different kinds. Many tiny purple verbena, forget-me-nots, much wild mignonette that has sweet little scent. Ask the boys what they were called. Here's that point I told you. They gave the usual dumbbell answer. It's a flower. And that's what I would call it. On the heaping banks towards the edge of the ravine, the asphodel grew wild, thick with tall flowers up to my shoulder, pink, and now he's going to do a whole paragraph on the asphodel. These asphodels are very noticeable, spasmodic. They feature all the great landscapes. I thought the boys surely would have a name for it, but no, sheepishly they make the same answer. E fiore, puzza. It's a flower, it stinks. Both facts being self-evident, there was no way of contradicting it, though the smell of the asphodel is not objectionable to me, and I find the flower now, I know it very well, beautiful, with its way of opening stone pale, big starred pink flowers, and leaving many of its buds shut with their dark reddish stripes. Anyway, he gives a whole history of the asphodel. The Greeks make much of this flower. It's true the word asphodel makes one expect something tall and mysterious lily, not this sparky sort of flower with just a touch of the onion about it. But for me, I don't care for mysterious lilies, not even for the weird shyness of the Mariposa lily. Having stood on the rocks in Sicily with the pink asphodels proudly sticking up like clouds at sea, taller than myself, letting off pink different flowerlets with such sharp and vivid eclat, and saving up such a store of buds and ear stripes, I confess I admire the flower. I have a certain reckless glory such as the Greeks love. Then he goes on about the narcissus and the, sort of comparing it to the modest daffodil. I believe that the English don't like the asphodel because we don't like proud and sparky things, and he goes on like that. Talks about the Grand Canyon. Well, finally he gets to this place. It's a queer stillness and a curious peaceful repose in the Etruscan places. Not like the Celtic places or the great pyramids of India or the Buddhist palaces in Ceylon. He's been everywhere, but here a softness, and I must tell you, it's true. If you go there, you'll feel what he's talking about. These great grassy mounds, these tumulus, as he calls them. I guess it's page 9. They're big and handsome, these homes of the dead cut out of living rock, just like houses. The Romans always burned their slaves, whereas at Cerveteri, the masters were laid full-length, sometimes in great stone sarcophagi, etc., and I think the slaves with them is what he was trying to say. Well, I have to skip along here, or I'm never going to get anywhere. You see some of the animal, but if you go along here, the tomb seems so easy and friendly. Cut out of rock underground. What page is that? 13 or so? One does not feel oppressed descending into them. It must be partly owing to the peculiar charm of natural proportion. There's one of his ideas. Natural proportion. Which is in all Etruscan things of the unspoiled, unromanized centuries. A simplicity combined with most peculiar, free-breasted naturalness and spontaneity. This is the philosophy that he's presenting to you. In the shapes and movements of the underworld, I think it's the thing that we today, to some extent, respond to. Movements of the underworld walls and spaces that are once reassures the spirit. The Greeks sought to make an impression. This is why he likes pre-Greek things. Gothic, meaning the medieval with its tall cathedrals. Still more wants to overwhelm you, impress you. The Etruscans, no. The things they did in their easy centuries, and he may be reading too much into it, but I think he's got it probably right, are as natural and as easy as breathing. That's what he wants. They leave the breast breathing freely and pleasantly with a certain fullness of life, even the tunes, and that is true of Etruscan quality. Ease, naturalness, abundance of life. No need to force the mind or soul in any direction. Just be natural. And to the death, to the Etruscan, was a pleasant continuance of life. Natural continuance of the fullness of life. Everything in terms of life, living. In everything, Etruscans say the tombs have been wiped out. Seems strange. One goes out again into the April sunshine at the sunken road. So he goes, he compares, there's some phallic stones outside some of these tombs. Lingams, as he calls them. So he sees his first phallic stones outside the tumuli, some carved very beautifully with inscriptions on the tumuli. Further along. And perhaps in the insistence on these two symbols, the other symbol is the arcs, as he calls it, the arc or the wound. So this, if you like, lingus, which is a phallic symbol, which is just the male sex organ, and arcs, female symbol. In the Etruscan world, we can see the reason for the utter destruction and annihilation of the, I've been to Italy and places. If you go to Pompeii, you can walk down the streets and you can get hit by a penis sticking out from the buildings. Just knock you in the head if you don't worry about it. You can go to a building in Pompeii and there'll be a big, huge phallus, right in the courtyard, as bigger than a human. This is what was going on back then in those places. They called them Herms, H-E-R-M-E-S. And it begins here with the Etruscans. The New World, the utter destruction, see, he wants to release this, which is where he's coming back from releasing the sexuality in that, in his literature and in his art. The New World wanted to rid itself of these fatal dominant symbols of the Old World, the morality, the Puritanism. The Etruscan consciousness was rooted quite blindly in the symbols, the phallics and the arcs. So the whole consciousness, the whole Etruscan pulse and rhythm had to be wiped out. Now we see again in the blue heavens with the larks singing. Why the Romans called the Etruscan vicious. Even in the palmiest days, Romans were not saints. But they thought they ought to be. They hated the phallus and the arcs because they wanted empire, dominion, riches, social gain. You cannot dance gaily to the double flute and at the same time conquer nations or rake in large sums of money. To the greedy man, everybody that is in the way of his greed is vice incarnate. And he's getting there. He's getting to what he's talking about. For him, life is enough. You don't need empire. You don't need vast amounts of wealth and things of that kind. Okay, so we finished with Cherubiteri. I got to move on quickly over here, if I can, to Tarquinius. Just the last sentence of the Cherubiteri one, the last paragraph. As he clatters down the post-omnibus, we rattled to the station about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll probably see the bus surrounded by a dozen buxom, handsome women saying goodbye to one of their citizenesses. And in the full, dark, handsome, jovial faces, surely you see the luster still of the life-loving Etruscans. What we call Tuscany now, Tuscan cooking, Tuscan art, the Renaissance that came out of Tuscany, of course. Those are the successors to the Etruscans. Tuscany is the Etruscan area of Italy. And that's where, of course, the art in the medieval period started to grow again, the humanism and so on. So in his view, he doesn't say here, this was just pushed down only to come back to life. And the thing we most admire about Italian civilization is the Tuscan revival of the Renaissance and so on. And the cooking, of course, in Tuscany is the most superior in Italy as well. The life-loving Etruscans. There are some level Greek eyebrows, but surely there are other vivid, warm faces, still jovial with Etruscan vitality, beautiful with the mystery of the unrivaled art. Here's this sexual consciousness ideology. Right with the phallic knowledge. He calls it the phallic consciousness. So out of this book, you see, you're getting a philosophy not trying to tell you all to jump up and jump into the phallic consciousness, but this has a huge influence on the contemporary world in its own quiet, subconscious way, bringing these things out and making them, you know, open for all to see, right with the phallic conscious knowledge and the Etruscan carelessness. He likes that carelessness. Okay, so he goes through to a museum here, and for instance, in this museum chapter, starting in the paragraph there was never an Etruscan nation, he has a sentence. From the shadow of the prehistoric world emerged dying religions that have not yet invented gods or goddesses. This is before gods and goddesses. But live by the mystery of the elemental powers of the universe, the complex vitalities of what we feebly call nature. And the Etruscan, this is, see, not Annapolis anymore, this is a prophet now. And the Etruscan religion was certainly one of these. The gods and goddesses don't seem to have emerged in sharp, that was about page 20, in any sharp definiteness. But it's not for me to make assertions, only that which half emerges from the dim background of time is strangely stirring. And after having read all the learned suggestions, most of them contradicting each other, all the dumb scholars you'll encounter, and I find it in most fields, including my own. And then having looked sensitively at the tombs and Etruscan things that are left, one must accept one's own resultant feeling. Okay. So now he gets along here, he has some trouble at Lattice Poli. They push on, talks about Michelangelo further along on page 25, 27, and so on. And another section of philosophy, I think, which would be about 28. Here, I think he is finished with the museums, and he wants to go into the tombs of this other new place, Tarquinian, which is about 25 or 30 miles further north up the road along the seacoast. It's a relief to think that even the slaves and the luxurious Etruscans had many in historical times, had they remained decently stored. It's all a question of not like in Rome where the dead pits, where the bodies of slaves were promiscuously flung. It's all a question, this is what he's trying to say, of sensitiveness, being sensitive. And here's the thing I was saying that probably women would understand more than most of us men. Brute force and overbearing may make a terrific effect, but in the end, that which lives by delicate sensitiveness. If it were the question of brute force, not a single human baby would survive for a fortnight. It is the grass in the field, like Whitman says, most frail of all things that supports all life all the time. But for the green grass no empire would rise, no man would eat bread, grain is grass. Hercules, Napoleon, the heroes of his time, Henry Ford, would alike be denied existence. Brute force crushes plants, yet plants rise again. The pyramids will not last a moment compared with the daisy. And before Buddha or Jesus spoke, the nightingale sang. And long after the words of Jesus and Buddha are gone into oblivion, the nightingale will still sing. Because it's neither preaching nor teaching nor commanding or urging, it's just singing. And before the beginning was not a word, as he says the New Testament obviously speaks to the Gospel of John, but a chirp. Because a fool kills a nightingale with a stone, is he therefore greater than the nightingale? Because the Romans took the life out of the Etruscan, was he therefore greater than the Etruscan? Not he. Rome fell, and the Roman phenomenon with it. But Italy today is far more Etruscan in pulse than Roman, and it will always be so. The Etruscan element is like the grass of the field, and that's true. If you go to Italy, it's not Roman, it's not conquering, it isn't brute force. It's delicate sensitivity in art, in design, in just about everything that they do, in cooking and so on. And it's Etruscan. He looks at this one place and he sees another symbol that he's interested in, the navel, and the patera and the mundum. A round saucer with a raised knob in the center is what he's seeing in this one museum. It's a symbol of the living cell, he says, with its nucleus. The indivisible God of the beginning, which remains alive and unbroken, and the eternal quick of all things. There's a favorite word that he's going to start to talk about. and it becomes the sun of the firmament and the lotus of the waters. And here he's waxing really poetic. So within each man, this quick idea that he has, which is a word you rarely hear, and the sun maintains its own quick living force, unbroken forever. And there's a living quick of the sea is alive. And all the waters, and every living created thing has its own unfailing quick. So within each man or woman is the quick of him or her. When he is a baby and when he is old, the same quick, some spark, unborn, undying, vivid life electron. And this is what is symbolized in this patera here, which were made, he knows these things by intuition. How he knows these things, I have no idea. It's quite an amazing thing. Look at the next page about Etruscan art and the leaders called the Lucumones, the prince magistrates. They were not aristocrats in the Germanic sense. They were first and foremost leaders in the sacred mysteries. The magistrates then of family and wealth, so there's always a touch of vital life, of life significance. So now let's go. The tombs is where we really want to go. It's useless to look at Etruscan things before the tombs, number 3 section. For uplift, if you want uplift, go to the Greek, the Gothic. But if you love the odd, spontaneous forms that are never standardized, go to the Etruscans. But the fact that the very fullness of museums makes one rush through them, like I said. See, the museums are so full of stuff that you get exhausted. So they go to this new place, which is not just tumuli or mounds. It's another necropolis. You go down into these tombs. His guide has a lamp and a little terrier dog with him. I think it's page 34. The lamp begins to shine and smell, and they go into it. Now, of course, they have little electric lights that you turn on with a big clatter. It's horrible now, but they put glass over everything so nobody can deface them or the humidity can't get them. But anyway, the guide's lamp flares up to so few tourists at that time, and you inside this something bare and familiar, but not like the splendid tombs at Chibetri. It is the tomb of hunting and fishing, and I wish I could show you. I wish you had a picture of it. I have a picture of it. I don't know if I can give it to you quick, so I don't have much more time for this. But I'll see if I can show you. Oh, here it is. These are the tombs. It's almost impossible to see, but they've got birds flying here in the sky, boats on the water, half-naked fishermen jumping into the water, porpoises jumping out of the water, divers diving into the sea, birds flying across the sky. It's all, as he says, quick with life. This is on the tomb wall. No Buddhas or Jesus or stuff like that. Just life. The scene is natural as life. It gets heavy, archaic, fullness of meaning. It's the death banquet. You have these banqueters too. On one wall there'll be people having a meal like the Last Supper. The dead man banqueting in the underworld. But the underworld for the Etruscans was a gay place. There was a profound belief in life. For the life of earth was so good, the life below could not be but a continuance of it. It's still vivid in painted tombs. There's certain dance and glamour in all the movements, even in the naked slave men. There are no mean downtrodden menials like later Romans. The slaves in tombs here are surging with full life. We go up the steps and old dog shambles. And they go down into another tomb. And this is the tomb of the leopards. And the paintings are fresh and alive, ochre reds and blacks. A beautiful color. The walls of this little tomb have a real delight. Vivid life-accepting fullness of the people with real fullness. The dancers move with strange, powerful alertness. The men are dressed only in loose-colored scarves. The subalo plays a double flute the Etruscans loved. And so they move on, their long sandaled feet, their limbs full of life to the tips. The sense of vigorous, strong-bodied liveliness is characteristic of the Etruscans. And it's somehow beyond art. You cannot think of art, but only of life itself. As if this were the very life of the Etruscans, dancing in their colored wraps, ruddy from the air, dancing and fluting along little olive trees. This is a man who's about to die himself. Anyway, he gives you, the man at the end is holding up between his thumb and foreground an egg. This is your Easter egg. Showing it, but this is 5th century BC, showing it to the yellow-haired woman who reclines next to him. And in her left hand, this is page 40, I think, as if to touch her breast. He in the right hand holds a large wine dish for the revelry. The next couple, a fair-haired woman, are looking around and making a salute. It seems they too are saluting the mysterious egg held up by the man at the end, who is no doubt the man who has died. Anyway, he explains what this egg is. It's the egg of resurrection. There's a mystery and portentousness in the simple scenes which go deeper than commonplace life. And then in the next page, how lovely these have been and still are, the band of dancers, the broad-bodied young men. They're dancing in open past trees. And here he concludes his point. Every part of the body and of the anima, the soul, the Greek shall know, Greek word for the soul is anima, because it moved the body like an animal. It shall know religion and be in touch with the gods. Towards this woman comes the young man piping, and strong legs dance, so full of life. He also talks about being smeared in red, as the Native Americans, the Red Indians, as he calls them, do. When they wish to figure in their sacred and portentous selves, they smear their bodies all over with red. American Indian told him once, this is medicine. Vermilion is the color of his sacred, important God body. Apparently it was all in the ancient world too. Man in scarlet was his bodily God self. Well, he knows this stuff, you see. Beyond, he just intuits it, and he seems to know. He says at one point there's more life in one moving leg that you see. Here it is, here on page 44. On the broken wall are dancing legs of a man, and there's more life in these Etruscan leg fragments as they are than in whole bodies of men today. I think probably things have improved since his time. Then he sees the dolphins, and they're mysterious too. I told you about them. They are diving into the sea, diving and leaping all downwards into the rippling sea. Again, the egg he speaks about. And I guess what he speaks about is these dolphins that dive, and later on the ducks and things, that they're going into the sea to come in touch with the ancient mysteries. 46, once it was all bright and dancing, deep and sincere honor rendered the dead. For no part of us, as the old pagan writer says, and our bodies shall be, which does not feel religion. And so on. And this is evident in the Etruscan things. Again, on the next page, he speaks about the mysterious egg. Finally, a paragraph, I think it's 49. The natural flowering of life. It's not so easy for human beings as it sounds. Behind all the Etruscan liveliness was a religion of life, which the chief men were seriously responsible for. Yet all the dancing was a vision and even a science of life. So you're beginning to get this here. Every man, every creature, tree, lake, mountain, stream were animate, had its own peculiar consciousness, as it did today, as it does today. The old idea of the vitality of the universe was evolved long before history began, and so on. So you can read that yourself. It talks about the touch that people have then. Let me, he goes lastly here, 52, what I'm trying to tell you about. The sea is this vast, here's the diving into the sea of the divers, the ducks, the dolphins, creature that had a soul too, whose inwardness is the womb of all things. When you started this, you didn't know he was going to get this far when we were just on that old truck clattering into the village. Out of which all things emerge, and in which they're devoured back. Balancing the sea is the earth of inner fire, of afterlife, and before life. Beyond the waters, the ultimate fire lay only that oneness of which the people knew nothing. But the sea the people knew, the dolphin leaps in and out of it, is something as a creature that something exists out of nowhere. He's not, and lo, there he is. The dolphin which gives up the sea's rainbows only when he dies. Out he leaps. Then with a head dive, back again he plunges into the sea. He is so much alive. He's like the phallus. Back to his phallic consciousness, sex symbols, carrying the fiery spark of procreation, down to the wet darkness of the womb. The diver does the same, carrying like a phallus his small hot spark into the depths of death, and the sea will give up her dead life like dolphins that leap out and have the rainbow within them. But the duck that swims on the water lifts his wings is another matter. The blue duck or goose so often represented by the Etruscans, he is the same goose, and so on and so forth. The duck does not live down within the waters as the fish. The fish is the anima, the life force, the animate life, the very clue to the vast sea, the watery element of the first submission. For this reason, Jesus was represented in first Christian centuries as a fish. So if you go around Orange County or wherever you are, see in the back of cars these fish symbols, he tells you where it comes from, what it means. Where people still thought as Etruscans in Italy. Jesus was the anima, the moving life force of the vast, moist, ever-yielding element, which was the opposite and the counterpart of the red flame of the pharaohs. Well, I mean, he really, as you can see, has it all. 54, whatever is laid on his shoulder is a sign of power added. And then he goes into the augurs. Next time, I'll just do a little bit of that augur material and finish this up with you next time. I hope you find something useful in this book.